everyone I've ever come in contact with, they always make a big mistake. What's the big mistake? They always think, oh, spirituality, that's gotta look spiritual. Infinity, that has to look infinite. Again, the physical is physical, and infinity is infinity, and something that I can understand. And ultimately, this is the biggest source of any mistake when it comes down to pursuing a relationship with infinity, with our Creator. It's the biggest mistake you could think is, oh, I'm now going to limit infinity to look infinite. And that the truth is that it's actually the exact opposite. And this can come down to something else we can talk about later on as the main difference between any other religion or spirituality versus, say, Judaism, for example, and ultimately why there is such a groundbreaking revolution within Judaism versus everything else. And ultimately, we can start from the main perspective of comparing through Buddhism, because what's the main tenet of Buddhism? That the source of all of your suffering is coming from your desires. Your desires for, again, let's say, for the most part, obviously it's talking about physicality, money, women, or any spouse, for example, or I want a house, I want safety, I want food, I want health, I want all these things, and ultimately for me wanting all these things, that is something that is inherently non-spiritual. That is something that is inherently not connected to God, and ultimately God created this world as an illusion, just so I could escape it, right, and be able to elevate myself above to the next world. And if I don't do that, then ultimately I'll just keep getting reincarnated and be stuck within this low physical world. And that's ultimately their opinion, that's their opinion. And there's a big truth in that. And what's the truth that we can take out of that? The truth that we can take out of that is, yeah, of course, you're not supposed to completely go within the physicality just for your own needs. And that, again, if you go within the physicality for your own needs, then you're not able to access anything infinite there, right? Especially if it's coming from a place of what I understand, what is that I want, and doing too much. And at the same time, it is also the root of all your suffering. But the main thing is that there's a big mistake, there's a big fallacy in thinking that because I have suffering, thus that is bad. Right? I mean, what? It's like, okay, it's like, fine, like, you want to say that the root of all my suffering is desire. And so what? Thus what? What are you saying? That's bad? You're doing it wrong? You're living wrong because you have suffering, because you have desires? You're missing the whole point. You're missing the whole point. So again, right off the bat, what do we see? We see that the whole entire tenet of escape your desires and escape suffering is coming from a completely selfish point of view. And so everyone looks at Buddhism and says, oh, that is the most spiritual thing possible. And it's like, no, you're just doing this from a spiritual thing. I mean, for your selfish thing. It's got nothing to do with spirituality. What does that do with spirituality? That is, I am selfish. I want to escape suffering. Right? So thus, I'm going to escape desires. I'm going to escape what the physical world has to offer me. I'm going to escape pain and suffering. It's like, what people are like, yeah, that's spirituality. And we see the same thing now with like modern day spirituality going within the world. Everything's about, oh, can I do meditations, and again, I escape the suffering, and I feel calm, I feel peace, and I feel love and happiness. And only when I feel those emotions am I actually connected to infinity, am I actually spiritual. And it's like, what? You're missing the whole point. Spirituality doesn't have to look spiritual. Again, first off, who said that spirituality means I feel good about myself? If anything, that is a physical thing. So that, if anything, that's just not, according to your definition of spirituality, that is not spirituality, according to you. If that's what you want to say, it's got nothing to do with spirituality. That's just, I feel good, I am selfish, I want to escape the suffering and the pain. So thus, let me go escape it, escape my desires, and escape the world, and everything is good. And now I can convince myself that I am a good person, doing the right thing, connecting to infinity, and all these other people out there are stupid. That's the opinion. And again, you are missing the entire point, because that is a completely selfish vantage point. You're connected to infinity on a place of complete selfishness. And again, that'll then beg the question if you're actually connecting to infinity or not. So ultimately, what's the actual truth? How can you actually connect to infinity? First off, you have to understand, what is this physical world that everyone is struggling with? Again, Buddhists, Christians, Islam, Hindus, everyone is struggling with the same question of the physical world. And for the most part, everybody holds escape this physical world, right? Either for, again, to escape suffering, or to get some sort of redemption, or to get heaven, right? And again, all those things are always coming from a place of what I can get out of it, right? It's either, again, I can get away from suffering, or I can get the next world, I could get heaven, right? Or, either, again, for Islam, 72 virgins, or for Christians, it's going to be, I can get reincarnation or resurrection of the dead, right? And then you could get salvation and be in heaven forever. And ultimately, these are all equally selfish things, right? What does that do with spirituality? That's just what I want. Again, if I do good things, if I escape the physicality, if I escape the physicality, then I can then actually be able to connect to the spirituality. But it's like, what does that have to do with anything? It's got nothing to do with anything spiritual. That is just, this is what makes me feel good about myself, right? And then I convince myself that I'm a good person because I do these things, but it's got nothing to do with truth. It's got nothing to do with connecting to infinity. That's just me trying to connect to myself. It's just me trying to feel good about myself. So it's a big difference. It's really a big difference. And ultimately, the main thing to understand is, again, what is this source of physicality? What is this infinity? Where does that actually come from? So we have to source it back. So let's trace it back. Where does this physicality come from? Where does it come from? It's coming from the highest will. The highest will of God possible. The highest will of infinity, of our source possible. So this will ultimately is able to come from a place of infinity, way above our understanding of infinity. It's coming from that place. It's coming from that place. Meaning in that place there is no separations, right? There are no separations. There's no will and infinity. It doesn't work like that. Everything is only one in that place of real infinity. Everything's only one. Once you start saying there's separations, well then there's no true oneness. Now, complete error right there. So ultimately it's complete one. So the will and infinity are complete one, right? So you can't make separations. So then what do you have? That will is ultimately what? Inherent within infinity is this will of what? To make a physical world. For what purpose? Why is there a physical world? Is it just so you could have your virgins? Is it just so you could have your salvation? Is it just so you could have the ability to escape suffering and not being reincarnated? Is it that? Is it just for selfish means for you? Or is it for something that's actually a lot higher than that? So let's go within the side that there's something a lot higher than that, right? Ultimately, it's coming from a place of the really highest meaning is, and we'll go through one of the reasons I think is really the main source reason for all of them, is there's a greater level of infinity, revelation of infinity, that is expressed through the physical itself. Because again, infinity does not have to look infinite, right? It doesn't have to look the way that you want it to look. It does not have to look like, what people imagine as this understanding of infinite, and or like someone who's looking spiritual, right? He's meditating in a cave and he's got robes and this and that, and everything's good. It doesn't have to look like that. You are now limiting that understanding of infinity to a physical, finite construct that is made within your brain. And ultimately, that level of infinity is nullified to a true level of infinity, which does not have to be bound by your own understanding, by your own physical fences or mental fences. It doesn't have to be bound by that. That's just your own opinion, right? And that's all you could understand. So again, if you come from that perspective, that is just what I could understand. That is coming from a selfish vantage point. But the truth is that infinity is actually coming from a place a lot higher than that. Infinity can actually be manifest as either or. It could look infinite, it could look finite. Again, it could look like a constantly, infinitely expanding universe, or like an infinitesimally small decimal point, right? 0.99999, forever. And that is our, limited physical understanding of infinity. That is the lower level of infinity. Or it could come from the level of a higher infinity, where the infinite could look like this entire physical moment. So ultimately, that is literally what the physical things are. Because then you have to ask yourself, well then how can we even get physicality? Where does physicality actually come from? How's it actually here? How do we get from this level of true infinity to physicality? From ultimately a nothingness to a something. And this is ultimately something that comes down to the root of what our, the real ego is. And this is something we'll probably talk about another time, of the source of the ego. And ultimately the somethingness that we feel versus the nothingness. And that's probably something, that's probably better to talk about another time after this. But the main point to get from this is, again, infinity does not have to look infinite. It does not have to look infinite. It does not have to look infinite at all. It could look like either or, finite, infinite, whichever one. So ultimately, that will comes down and manifests this physical world, manifests all the physicality. So again, the main source of all the physical within this world is what? Is infinite, is infinity. That is the physicality you're looking at, right? So then again, that does not mean, God forbid, I can just go down the strip club in Thailand or Netherlands, wherever you want, take your pick, and just do whatever I want there, and just go for it and eat as much as I want, and just keep going and doing all the physical things I want. That's not the point, God forbid. But the point is that there is physicality as it's manifest as the main part of this will that is one with the true infinity. And then there's the stuff that's kind of like the physicality that comes behind the back. Again, you create something, for example, or you have let's say you want to make a soccer game, right, for example. So ultimately, the main part of the soccer game is, again, I have the teams, and I have the goals, and I have the ball, right? The things that are additional to that is like, the fans and the weather and all the other things that are in addition to it. It's not that I want, the main point of me creating this soccer game is this way I have nice weather, this way I have fans. That's not the point. Those things are there just because I want a game, right? But the main point is I want a game. I want teams, right? I want a whole game to be played. So there's things that are ultimately the main result, or the direct result of the will, and there's things that are the indirect results of the main will. So there's a big distinction. But ultimately, within all the physical things we have, we can then trace those things back to the main result of this main will. And that is up to us to be able to figure out and find out, well then, how do I do that? When it comes down to, and ultimately, that's really ultimately what the whole point of Torah is, right? Is this way I can find out what is that main will? What is that main way to connect to infinity that goes beyond my understanding, right? The point isn't this way I'm bound within my understanding. There is a certain advantage of being able to grasp a certain part of it within my understanding, right? This way I can actually relate to it. This way it is something that is also bound within the physical world. But I did not want it to only be bound within the physical world. I want it to be both, bound within the physical world and at the same time completely transcended it. To be able to bridge this quantum leap. Right? So that's something ultimately you have to find for yourself and figure out, well then, how do I actually be able to connect to this true level of infinity that is able to permeate the physical world? So you need to find that for yourself. And when you do find that for yourself, and as I found that within Torah, then you can actually elevate the physicality into its true source as infinity. And from there, again, there is a big gap that is bridged, again, in a whole quantum leap that occurs from the infinity to the physical, right? Or again, infinity as it looks infinite into the infinity as it looks physical or finite. And so that's the main advantage. So again, what's the whole point of all this, of this physicality? It's so this way the infinite is not limited to looking infinite. It's so that this way the infinite can have a greater revelation of being infinite as being manifest as finite physicality. So that is the whole point of this physical world being created like this. So this way you can now actually create or relate to your creator through this physical world, because only when I'm within a physical world and there's me and there's you and there's duality and everything is confused and separate, then only there can I actually relate to our creator, just like we can relate to somebody outside of ourselves. Only there can we have the relationship. So only within this world can we have this relationship, and that's something that we can talk about another time. But that's the main point, is that Dafka is literally within this physical world do we find a greater revelation of the infinite. And it's within this physical world, within the physicality, and go through the motions of what it means to be a human, to interact with the physical, can I then relate to a true level of infinity, to a true infinite will, and actually have a true relationship, and fully fulfill the whole purpose of creation. And then that is how I actually achieve spirituality. But it's not through escaping the world. When you escape the world, you miss the whole point. You don't even touch infinity. You touch a level of man-made infinity that is nullified to a true infinity. So neither are you connecting to infinity through your means, right, that you think you are, and neither are you connecting to the real infinity. You're just squandering your whole entire life. So again, only through the physicality can I connect to the true infinity. And when I try to escape the physical, then I connect to nothing.